The black SUV crawled through the gates of Southridge Springs like a stranger stepping into the living room of white suburbia. Hesitant, quiet, fully aware that every glance it drew wasn't curiosity. It was judgment. Behind the wheel, Damian Sullivan sat in silence, eyes fixed on the steering wheel. In the passenger seat, 12-year-old Aria, her face a haunting echo of her late mother, wore headphones, staring out the window, saying nothing. Southridge Springs was the kind of place people paid for peace, for order, for sameness. But for Aria and her father, it wasn't skin color or property lines that made them different. It was what people couldn't see. Memory. The memory of a girl who'd lost her mother to cancer just 8 months earlier. The memory of a father, a former Tier 1 operator who'd led missions no one was ever meant to know about. And now, the memory of both of them rested quietly in the back of the vehicle, in the form of Echo, a specially trained German shepherd turned therapy dog. Echo had once been a warrior. Now Echo was a bridge, a safe place. The one thing Aria hadn't lost when her mother died. Damian didn't choose Southridge because he liked it. He chose it because it was safe, because the schools were good, because Aria's therapist had said she needs stability, a clean slate, somewhere that doesn't remind her every day that her mom is gone. But the moment the SUV pulled up to house number 19, with its shingled roof, wide porch, and fenced-in backyard, he knew. They weren't welcome here. That afternoon, Aria took Echo for a walk around the neighborhood. She didn't say much. She never did. Echo walked close beside her. No leash needed. Echo knew Aria's steps when she grew anxious, knew when to slow down, when to press his side against her leg to make her feel grounded. A middle-aged woman watering her roses turned away when Aria looked at her. A young couple playing with their toddler pulled the child inside as she walked by. And when she passed 4 men drinking beer in front of house number 11, one of them spoke, loud enough for her to hear. "Dogs that big? Usually for intimidation, not cuddles." No one laughed. They didn't need to. It wasn't a joke. It was a warning. From the porch swing across the street, Damian watched it all. Said nothing, wrote nothing down, just observed, like he used to during recon, deep behind the lines. That first dinner in Southridge, Aria barely touched her pasta. She picked at it in silence, eyes drifting toward the door where Echo lay with his chin on his paws, watching her in return. Damian sat across the table. He didn't ask. He knew that kind of silence. He'd lived in it for over a decade. "They don't like us," Aria whispered. Damian set his fork down, nodded. "Because we're different. But that's fine. We're not here to be liked, just not to be touched." Echo lifted his head at the sound of Aria's voice, then let it rest again. He exhaled deeply, as if to say, "As long as you're safe, I don't care what they think." The next day, Aria began school. Damian walked her to the car. Echo followed. Another mom, blonde, dressed in Nike track pants, led her son to the SUV nearby. When she saw Echo, she froze. "Oh, God, that breed around kids, that's an accident waiting to happen. Just be careful." Damian didn't respond, just nodded. Not out of politeness, but because men like that woman never stopped at words. Southridge Springs had unspoken rules. One of them was, don't disrupt the uniformity. Aria asked nothing on the way. Echo sat in the back seat, head out the window like he was guarding the world. Damian drove slowly, but his mind was already tracking routes, cameras, and every possible exit if things went wrong. He'd survived war zones. But this wasn't about bullets or mines. It was about organized silence. When they returned that afternoon, Damian spotted a patrol car parked 3 houses down. No lights, no siren, but clearly on duty. He picked up his phone, logged the plate, texted no one, just counted, first time. Echo padded around to the backyard, where Arya was watering the lavender her mother had once loved. The late sun streamed through the leaves, turning Echo's coat a warm, dusty gold. Arya looked up and smiled. Really smiled. For the first time since the funeral. Damien saw it. And he knew, without question, if anything ever came near that girl, he wouldn't need to ask what the law had to say. Because this time, he wasn't fighting for a flag. He was fighting for a home. That evening, Southridge Springs was bathed in a honey-colored calm. The sky was clear. The leaves whispered like old souls. Arya held Echo's leash, more formality than necessity. They walked past the white picket fence of Mrs. Grady's house, the oldest home in the neighborhood, where red geraniums hung from the porch and a faded American flag fluttered tiredly. "Careful now, sweetheart," Mrs. Grady called out, waving. Arya paused. So did Echo. The old woman smiled. "I used to have one just like him. Got kicked out of a restaurant once. Said he was too big. But he was the only creature who knew I was going to fall, before I even knew it myself." Mrs. Grady said nothing more. She didn't have to. Because with just one look at Echo, she understood. Arya lowered her head respectfully. "Yes, ma'am. Echo. He's not like other dogs." Mrs. Grady tilted her head slightly. "You're not like other kids either." Arya smiled, soft, uncertain. But it was real. The first time in months her heart felt a little lighter. It didn't last. As they turned down the narrow path leading to the Central Park, where just a few children played quietly beneath the trees, a low mechanical growl rolled in behind them. A black and white patrol car from the Southridge Springs Police Department crept up behind them. No sirens, no flashing lights. Echo stopped immediately, ears forward, eyes locked on the sound. His tail stayed low. No growling, no lunging. Just stillness. Arya felt her entire body tense, her heart pounded harder. She gave a soft tug on the leash, a signal Echo had been trained to understand. Hold your ground. Don't react. The cruiser came to a stop 2 meters away. 2 officers stepped out. The taller one spoke first. "Afternoon, sweetheart." His badge read, Vickers. The other, shorter, with close-cropped hair and sharp eyes, stood beside him. Randall. "You live around here?" Arya nodded slightly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, sir. Number 19. I'm just walking my dog." "Got a report," Vickers said, hand resting near the Glock on his belt. "Large dog roaming without a muzzle." "Echo's not roaming," Arya replied, her voice shaking. "I'm holding the leash, and he's a therapy dog." Randall crouched slightly, pretending to inspect. Echo didn't flinch, just stood there, still, eyes never leaving Arya. "Got papers on him?" Randall asked. Arya nodded. "Yes, sir. My dad has them. Where's your dad?" Vickers interrupted. "He's working. I'm just going around the park, that's all." Echo shifted forward, just half a step. No growl, no threat, just a quiet move. To stand in front of Arya, shielding her. Randall instinctively stepped back. "These breeds are unpredictable," he muttered. "He's just protecting me," Arya said quickly. "Stand still!" Vickers barked. Then, in a flash, his hand moved. A deafening crack shattered the afternoon air. Arya didn't understand what had happened. Not at first. Then she heard it. A harsh, broken cry tore from Echo's throat. The dog's powerful frame trembled, then crumpled like a tree cut at the base. "No!" Arya's scream ripped the world apart. She dropped to her knees beside Echo, arms wrapping around his body as blood soaked through her sleeves. "Echo! Echo, wake up! Please, wake up!" Her voice came in choking waves. Echo let out one final breath. A thin stream of blood slipped from the corner of his mouth. Those amber eyes, once alive with warmth every time Arya walked into a room, were now dull, shaking, then still. His tail moved once, one last flick, as if to say, "I'm still here." Then silence. Arya's scream rang out again, louder than before. It froze the entire park. Even the children on the swings went quiet. Randall stepped back. Vickers lowered his gun, expression blank. The dog showed signs of aggression. He muttered flatly. Across the street, a window creaked open. Mrs. Grady stood behind the glass, silent. In her wrinkled hands was a phone. She'd been recording the whole thing. No one noticed her. No one thought those aged hands could hold a camera steady. But they did. They caught everything. A therapy dog shot in front of a grieving child. "You killed him!" Arya shrieked. "You killed my dog! He didn't do anything! He just protected me!" Vickers walked toward her. "Calm down. We'll get everything sorted at the station." "No," Arya screamed. "I'm not going anywhere. My dad's coming home soon. He's gonna—" "We have the right to detain you for questioning," Randall said coldly, voice like steel. "I'm a minor!" Arya cried out. But her legs were giving out. Her knees buckled. Echo's blood was seeping into her clothes, running down her arms, her hands. Everything red. Vickers bent down and grabbed Arya's arm. "You're obstructing a police investigation." Arya sobbed uncontrollably. Somewhere in the distance, an ambulance siren began to wail. Someone must have called. Maybe Mrs. Grady. But all Arya could do was whisper the same sentence over and over, like a broken prayer trapped in a loop of pain. "Please don't take me. Please don't leave Echo." No one answered. No one knelt down beside her. No arms wrapped around her shaking shoulders. There was only the Southridge pavement, cold, grimy, and the blood of a friend who had died protecting her. At the Southridge Springs Police Department, there was a dull gray room labeled Interrogation B. Soundproof walls, a metal chair too big for a 12-year-old. Arya sat small and silent, her shirt stiff with dried blood. No one had cleaned her hands. A paper cup of water sat in front of her, untouched. No one in that room bore the name Sullivan. No father, no Aunt Jade. Just 3 officers behind a two-way mirror. And one young woman named Kara, trying her best to wear a soft, synthetic smile. "Arya, sweetheart, can you tell us what happened?" Kara asked gently, voice like silk. Arya didn't answer. "Were you ever afraid of the dog? Did he growl at strangers?" Kara leaned in, searching for eye contact. Arya turned her face away. Do you think Echo was trying to attack someone?" This time, Arya raised her head. Her eyes were red, swollen, but sharp. "Do you have a dog?" Kara blinked. No, but—" "Then don't ask me that." Arya looked down. Her voice cracked as it fell out of her chest. "Echo. He was the only one who knew I was going to cry before I did. How could someone like that ever hurt anybody?" Kara said nothing. Behind the glass, the watch sergeant shook his head. "She's in shock. Wait for a guardian." "We didn't detain her," Randall cut in. "We just asked her to come in for clarification. There's no statute that says we have to wait for a parent if it's just a couple of questions." "She's 12, Randall. You know that." "I know she had a big-ass dog with no muzzle. This can be spun as self-defense. If she was a blonde white girl from the golf course, it'd be a whole different story." No one disagreed. The air in the room thickened with silence and weak excuses. Across the street, behind a white picket fence, Marlene Grady stood in the shadows of her living room. Her hands trembled as she held her phone. She had filmed everything. From the moment the cruiser started tailing Aria and Echo, to the second the gunshot rang out, to Aria's broken screams calling out for her friend. Her hands weren't what they used to be, but her heart. Oh, her heart had never been clearer. "They think old folks don't see," she muttered. "They forget some of us saw the 60s. We remember guns that weren't pointed at people, but at existence." She sent the video to an old friend, a journalist who used to cover police brutality cases in St. Louis. Then she called 911, and called again, and again. Finally, she said one sentence to the dispatcher. "There's a black child being taken in alone. No guardian, no lawyer, and she just lost her only friend." Meanwhile, nearly 9,000 miles away, at a forward command base of the Strategic Response Division in Eastern Europe, Damian Sullivan sat hunched over a satellite map. In his hand was a pen, drawing an X over a freshly completed recon sector. A young soldier entered. "Urgent call for you, sir, from the U.S." Damian looked up. "Who is it?" "A woman. My name's Jade," she said. "Aria's in trouble." 15 minutes later, the ops room was empty. Damian had changed into civilian gear, a backpack slung over his shoulder. He didn't speak to anyone. Before leaving the base, he scribbled one line on the official exit form. Emergency reason, family. Priority level, absolute. Note: any threat to my home falls outside the jurisdiction of international treaties. Back in Southridge, night had fallen. Inside Interrogation B, Aria still hadn't moved. Her eyes were dry now, her cheeks burned red with leftover salt. A duty officer finally entered. "You're free to go. Someone's here for you." Aria didn't ask who, didn't say a word. But when she stepped out of the room, she saw her. Mrs. Grady, waiting by the door, holding a jacket. "Your dad's on his way," the old woman said. "But I'll take you home." Aria looked up at her, said nothing, just nodded. And Echo, in some space between memory and belief, was still walking beside her. No longer flesh and fur. The unmarked vehicle, arranged by the U.S. military, left the forward base at 1:23 a.m. Eastern European time. No warning lights, no escort. Just a man in a black jacket, a small backpack slung over his shoulder, and a face carved from stone. A diplomatic passport allowed Damian Sullivan to pass through 3 security checkpoints without much questioning. But it wasn't the paperwork that kept him moving. It was his eyes. The kind of eyes that had seen war close enough to hear the heartbeat of death. He didn't sleep on the plane, didn't read, didn't check the news. He just stared out the window, where moonlight skimmed the wing's surface like ice, and heard Aria's voice replay in his head, one last time, crackling through a satellite line. "Dad, Echo is dead." There had been no crying in her voice, only the hollow quiet of a soul stripped of its last companion. At John F. Kennedy International Airport, a silver SUV was already waiting at the curb. Damian got in without a word. He didn't greet the driver. No words were needed. Everything had been arranged. 3 hours later, the SUV rolled to a stop in front of the black iron gate of Southridge Springs. Damian stepped out. No luggage, no weapons. But every step he took was etched with readiness. No one saw him enter. No security camera caught his movements. The same skill set that once helped him escape encirclement in Kandahar now served a different mission: coming home. The door opened quietly after 3 knocks. 2 short, 1 long. a signal only Damien and Arya shared. Mrs. Grady stood in the hallway, dim porch light flickering behind her. Her face softened when she saw the man in black, standing there in the shadows, face hard as forged steel, but eyes filled with bottomless sorrow. "She's upstairs," she whispered. "Just fell asleep. But not peacefully." Damien nodded. He climbed the stairs like each one weighed 1,000 pounds. His hand trailed along the walls, past old memories Eleanor had hung before she passed, their wedding photo, a finger-painted drawing Arya made when she was 5. A note still taped to the fridge. "Don't forget her meds, babe. Love you." All of it is still there, except Echo, and a part of Arya's heart, gone with him. Arya lay curled under the blanket, the bloodied clothes replaced with clean pajamas, but her hair was still tangled, her legs stuck out like she couldn't find any place that felt safe. Damien sat at her bedside. He didn't wake her, just reached out and brushed her forehead, a gesture that used to make her giggle and squirm, laughing. "Too ticklish, Dad." Now, she just flinched, as if even in dreams she knew the world wasn't safe anymore. Arya's eyes opened. She didn't speak, didn't scream, didn't cry. She just reached for him. And Damien leaned down, pulled her into his arms, and held her tight, tight enough that if he let go, he feared she might vanish into the nightmare. "I'm sorry," Arya whispered, her voice choking. "I tried. I held the leash. I got down and held Echo." "This wasn't your fault," Damien said, and for the first time in years his voice trembled. Arya sobbed. "I saw the way Echo looked at me, like he knew he was dying, like he just wanted to say sorry for not staying longer." Damien couldn't answer, because he'd seen that look too, on battlefields, in foxholes, in the eyes of brothers he couldn't save. And now, his daughter, just 12, carrying that same memory. When Arya drifted back to sleep, this time in her father's arms, Damien gently laid her back down. He rose, stepped toward the door, then stopped. I turned to look at her one more time, her messy hair, her pale cheeks, one small hand clutching the corner of the blanket like someone might try to take it away. And he made a vow. "Arya," he whispered, voice low and sharp like a blade drawn from its sheath, "we will get justice for Echo. Not because a dog was killed, but because silence is killing a child." At 2:14 a.m., Damien closed her door. He didn't go to bed. Men like him, after years of surviving between heartbeats and explosions, don't keep full nights of sleep. Especially not tonight. He went downstairs, turned on the small kitchen light, and brewed a mug of coffee so dark it could knot the stomach of anyone who hadn't served forward. Then he opened his laptop. The surveillance system he'd installed before his deployment was still functional, though outdated. But Damien didn't need updates. He needed patterns, a shadow, a movement, a flicker of light. Anything. He started reviewing footage from the front door camera. Slowly. Minute by minute. Playback crawling. At 4:38 p.m. the day before, Echo was still wagging his tail as he stepped out the gate with Arya. Her face was kissed by sunlight, wearing that gray NASA hoodie Damien had mailed her from Iraq last year for her birthday. Even that was enough to make Damien's chest seize. He switched to the feed from Mrs. Grady's camera. The old technician he'd hired to install it last month had grumbled about the footage quality. Something about her 3 cats constantly rubbing up against the pole and shifting the angle. But tonight, thanks to those cats, Damien noticed the camera had tilted, just enough to catch the entire street from a second-floor window. He saw Arya stop as the 2 officers approached, saw Echo step in front of her, Not barking, not growling, just standing there. Then, gunfire. Echo collapsed like someone had shut the whole world off again. Damien didn't blink as he replayed the moment. Didn't shed a single tear. But his hand on the table edge turned white from how tightly he gripped it. Upstairs, Arya was dreaming of Echo. In her dream, there was no blood, no screams, only a vast lavender field stretching past the horizon. Echo ran freely, ears perked in the breeze, tongue lolling, eyes sparkling like those golden afternoons they spent on the porch, her mother reading poetry, Echo lying at her feet. Echo ran up to Arya, nudged his head against her chest. And just for a moment, the world felt still again. "Dad," Arya whimpered in her sleep. "Echo, come back." Damien heard her from the kitchen. He didn't rush up. Instead, he turned to the second screen and opened a new file, one that Mrs. Grady had printed out for him from an email forwarded by her nephew at the mayor's office. The dog exhibited aggressive behavior, presenting a threat to the officer. The officer acted in accordance with self-defense protocol. Minor was detained without a confirmed legal guardian present at time of contact. Damien finished reading. Printed it, laid each page flat on the mahogany table Eleanor had once picked as the place Arya learned to write her name. Then he stood. Didn't say a word. But each footstep echoed through the sleeping house like a war drum. Not because he was angry, but because he had made a decision. They would never lay a hand on Arya again, even if it meant burning this town to the ground. In Southridge Springs, the street lamps still glowed. Gates remained shut. No one stirred as a father began his counteroffensive. No one knew that tonight, the man who once dismantled a militant cell on the outskirts of Fallujah was hunched over a neighborhood map of South Ridge, plotting. No bombs, no bullets. But Damien Sullivan's weapon this time was truth. And he would detonate it at the perfect moment. Damien flipped on the basement light. The room had once been a storage space. Tools, old garden pots, boxes of Arya's childhood toys. But tonight, it became a tactical command center. He pulled a steel case from under the stairs, scanned his fingerprint, unlocked it. Inside, high-grade surveillance gear, infrared cameras, miniature audio transmitters, solar battery units, encrypted signal transmitters that bypassed cloud storage completely, gear he never used in peacetime, but never kept too far out of reach. He laid each piece out methodically, checked signal strength, battery life, range in a suburban environment. Each movement is precise, mechanical, as if the desert had never left his hands. At 3 a.m., Damien began mounting cameras. One under the porch awning, one behind the chicken coop, one on the old oak tree in the backyard, and one mounted inside the mailbox, because anyone wanting to send a message would have to walk right past it. Inside, a wireless system fed all footage directly to a laptop in the basement. Every file was encrypted, backed up on a secure drive, and duplicated on an offline reserve unit. No cloud, no leaks, no deletions, and most importantly, no denials. When the job was done, Damien sat down and made a call. Jade picked up after the third ring. "You know what time it is?" she groaned, but the second she heard his heavy breathing, her tone changed. "How's Arya?" "Asleep, still having nightmares," Damien said flatly. "Echo died in her arms." Jade was silent for a long beat. Then, a deep sigh. "What do you want?" "A federal civil suit, high visibility, public traction, enough fire to force this into the open." "This case could get buried," Jade warned. "You know that. Southridge is a hive. You poke it wrong, the whole thing swarms." "I'm not knocking on the door," Damien said coldly. I'm burning the hive." She understood instantly. That voice wasn't her brother, the one who cried when Arya took her first steps. It was the voice of a man who once led the Black Phantom unit on missions no one would ever read about. And when that man started a mission, he finished it, even if it meant walking through hell. "I'll start pulling court records," Jade said. "Focus on past misconduct involving Southridge PD. If we find a pattern, we can make a case for systemic abuse." "Thank you," Damien said. "Also look into a man named Malik Tyson. Lieutenant, recently assigned to Southridge. He was present the day Echo was shot. Didn't fire." "You think he's a witness?" "Maybe. Or someone being silenced." Damien ended the call. He accessed Tyson's personnel file through a back door in the police network. Some of his old contacts from Special Ops still kept him looped into classified systems. He didn't use that access often. But this time, he needed it. Tyson, West Point graduate, former Kabul deployment, clean record, no disciplinary flags, 3 months into the Southridge assignment. A man like that? Either he folds quietly, or he's about to blow the system wide open. Damien needed to know which. At sunrise, he left a note for Arya on the counter. "Went to get bread. Back soon." Then he drove southeast. Toward a small gas station Tyson was known to visit every Saturday morning. No sunglasses, no ball cap. Damien wanted to be seen, and he wanted to be recognized. Tyson stepped out of the convenience store with a steaming cup of coffee in hand. His face was younger than Damien expected, but his eyes were decades older. Damien didn't speak. He stood by his Jeep, back against the door, watching. No threatening move, no forced smile. Just a gaze, steady, unshaken, like the world could crumble, and that stare would remain fixed. Tyson paused. Their eyes met. A single nod, slow, firm, silent. For 7 long seconds, no words passed between them. But something was exchanged, not intel, not warnings, but recognition, a silent way of saying, "I know you know, and I know. You're stuck in the space between 2 lines." Tyson sipped his coffee, then walked on. But his shoulders tightened slightly, caught somewhere between relief and dread. 7 minutes later, after Tyson's gray pickup turned out of the lot, Damien finally slid into his driver's seat. He closed the door, let his eyes fall shut for just a moment. No one said a word. But deep in his gut, Damien felt it, the first answer to 100 unspoken questions. And maybe, for the first time since Echo fell, he wasn't alone. Damien spent the next 3 days watching Malik from a distance. No pressure, no contact, just silent observation. Malik Tyson, age 34, beat cop in Southridge Springs for nearly 4 years. His record was clean, but not flashy. No medals, no scandals, the kind of man who stayed invisible, the best strategy if you wanted to survive in a rotting system. Damien tracked him each morning, from the 3rd-floor walk-up in Lincoln Heights to the Southridge precinct. He watched how Malik always chose the far-left corner in the cafeteria, the one no one else sat at, where he ate cold sandwiches and read worn-out paperbacks alone. He noticed something else, too. Every time Malik was assigned to patrol with Vickers or Randall, he stayed quiet. No eye contact, no small talk. Kept just enough distance to do his job. But never enough to be called a teammate. Once, Vickers slapped Malik on the shoulder after arresting a black teenager for jaywalking. Malik didn't react, but Damien, watching through a hidden button cam, saw it. Malik's fist clenched so tight his knuckles turned bone white. That was the first sign of the fracture. On Wednesday morning, at 5:43 a.m., Damien returned to the gas station. No call, no warning, just presence. Tyson was filling his tank. The breeze blew open his jacket, revealing his service pistol and badge, glinting under the street lamp. Damien stepped forward, stood beside him. No introductions needed. "I'm here because of my daughter," Damien said, eyes locked on the horizon. "And I know you haven't forgotten her face." Malik nodded. No denial. "I was behind them when it happened," he said softly. Echo didn't growl, didn't charge. He just stepped forward. Shielded Arya. "And Vickers pulled the trigger." Damien turned to face him. "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because I knew they'd find a way to erase me," Malik said. "And if I disappeared, who would still be here to hold the line?" Damien said nothing. He reached into his coat and handed Malik a small memory card. "This has footage from my home cameras. Vickers and Randall showed up the night before. I didn't answer the door, but I caught everything. How they talked, how they scoped the place. They're starting to move." Malik took the card. His hands trembled slightly. "You have kids?" Damien asked. Malik nodded. "Little girl, 4 years old, brown eyes, curly hair, keeps asking why the moon doesn't fall out of the sky." "Then you understand," Damien said. "I don't need promises. I just need you to tell me when the real storm begins." Malik clenched the card in his palm. "I won't let my daughter grow up in a town where truth is the most dangerous thing to know." And just then, a wind swept through. The faint scent of gasoline drifted in its wake. Damien nodded, stepped away. No more words. But as he turned down the narrow road away from the plaza, he knew the counterstrike had a heartbeat now. Somewhere else, on the 7th floor of a modest law office in the heart of the city, Jade Sullivan sat hunched over 3 glowing monitors. A mug of ginger tea, cold and forgotten, rested in her left hand. Her right clicked through screen after screen, each file, each name, each address, each incident, each thread leading deeper into the same tangled web. Jade didn't need a light on. She'd grown used to working in the dark. The first case, a Puerto Rican family who moved to Brookdale, north of Southridge, in 2021. Father, retired Navy. Mother, elementary school teacher. They had a therapy dog for their 7-year-old son, who suffered from anxiety. 1 month after moving in, the dog was accidentally shot while playing in the yard. Police labeled it an unfortunate incident. No charges, no consequences. Next file, a single mother from Ethiopia, former Air Force. Her daughter was arrested for interfering with law enforcement after recording officers handcuffing a neighbor. The phone? Wiped clean. No footage recovered. Third file, a black engineer, Kandahar vet, moved to Southridge, stopped 4 times in 2 weeks by police. Why? The vehicle doesn't match the neighborhood. He sold his house, left town. Jade hit print. 1 by 1, pages slid out of the machine, forming piles. They all shared one thing. Every case happened in or around Southridge. Every victim was a person of color, or from a military family. And every file was handled by the same cluster of officers, including Vickers and Randall. Jade picked up the phone. Dialed. "I think I found what you're looking for," she told Damien. "And it's bigger than we thought." "Keep going." Damien's voice was low, clipped. "There's a string of cases marked closed due to insufficient evidence over the past 3 years," Jade explained. "Every one of them involves harassment of minority families. But here's what's strange. Most of those families have a background in law enforcement, military, or intelligence, and this name keeps popping up. Neighborhood Protection Committee. Shows up on flyers, local newsletters, even in a few internal police memos." "Sounds like a typical HOA," Damien muttered. "No," Jade replied flatly. "This is the legal front for a covert operation. I found a 2019 City Council file referencing their cooperative community safety monitoring with the local PD. Guess who signed the partnership? Damien closed his eyes. He already knew. Lieutenant Pearson, Jade confirmed. Vickers' commanding officer. Same guy who ran the community policing initiative that was quietly shut down last year after a surge of complaints. Damien stood, walked to the wall where a map of Southridge was pinned with red thread and pushpins. Give me the full list, every address, every name, every incident, everyone connected to that committee. Jade hesitated. What are you going to do? Find the heart of this web, Damien said coldly. And if I have to, I'll burn it out. At the same time, deep in the basement of his home, Damien sat in darkness, reviewing footage captured from the hidden cameras he'd scattered across Southridge. Sidewalks, corners, shop fronts, parking lots. Each clip formed a mosaic of quiet movements, veiled intentions. Then, something. Damien froze the frame. A man in a brown jacket stepped out of a pickup truck parked outside Mr. Carlton's home. The retired Asian officer who'd filed a complaint about being profiled. That same night, Carlton's car had been torched. The man bent down, left an envelope at the doorstep. Damien zoomed in. The face was obscured. But on the wrist, a tattoo, a circle with 3 spikes pointing inward, an old symbol, sentry circle. Damien shot to his feet. This wasn't a personal vendetta anymore. This was a battlefield. And Aria, Echo, all the victims who'd stayed silent, were waiting for someone willing to step into the fire. 3 days later, at 9:43 a.m., Damien arrived at Building 26A, a squat, aging office block on the edge of Southridge's commercial zone. The sign out front read, Southridge Community Watch Council. But Jade had confirmed, this was a shell office, a front for Sentry Circle operations. Damien wore a full technician's uniform from the regional internet provider. The logo was real, the badge scannable. The credentials had been rebuilt by an old friend who owed him a favor from a black ops assignment years ago. He knocked with his left hand, just enough for the entry camera to misregister his face. A balding man with glasses opened the door. Before the man could speak, Damien raised his clipboard. Central Admin flagged a signal instability from this node. Might be interference from your boardroom's equipment. The man looked at the form, squinted, then nodded. 3rd floor. Watch out for the cabling. This building's ancient. Appreciate it. Shouldn't take more than 15 minutes. Damien stepped inside. Never looked back. His walk was the walk of someone with a task, not a mission. Someone forgettable. Someone invisible. But every step was calculated. Distance from cameras, line of sight, cover hand for elevator buttons. The 3rd floor opened into a gray carpet hallway with 4 main offices and 1 door at the end, labeled Restricted Access. Keypad lock. Damien pulled a small military-grade decoder from his tool belt. Modified. 15 seconds. Green light. He stepped inside. The room was no more than 20 square meters. No windows, no sunlight, but it held a large metal desk with 3 computer monitors still active, a metal file cabinet, a rattling old photocopier in the corner. He started with the files. Paper documents, thick folders labeled with names, photos, move-in dates, military service, current occupation. Each file was marked, red, yellow, or blue. The notes, light surveillance, tight watch, or intervention recommended. One folder read, Project Barrier, Sector A. The first name, Carlton. Then Martinez, Cuban-American Marine. Then Aria Sullivan. Damien stopped breathing. The page was clear. Daughter of Damien Sullivan. History of psychological trauma. Currently living with parent exhibiting PTSD symptoms. potential community risk. Recommendation: initiate CPS inquiry. Status: forwarded to internal operations. The air in the room chilled. Damien inhaled once, folded the file, slid it into the tactical backpack, then moved to the hard drive connected to the central server. 3 quick steps. Encrypted USB inserted. Copy initiated. The data was heavy. 4 minutes. Every second felt like a heartbeat skipping. When it finished, Damien ejected the drive, powered off the system, and locked everything behind him. He left the building unnoticed. But as his Jeep rolled out of the lot, a hidden camera in the rearview mirror recorded the entire perimeter. License plates, facial profiles, and the silhouette of a man watching from the 4th floor, in a window that was supposed to be vacant. That night, back in the basement, Damien and Jade sat together. On screen, a list of 27 names. Families of color, veterans, children who had grown up with fear. Jade turned to him. "You know if this gets out, they'll come for you, right?" Damien stared straight ahead. "I know." Jade was quiet. Then she nodded. "Then from now on, you won't be fighting alone." The next morning, in a law office tucked between the brick alleys of River Falls Historic District, Jade Sullivan, former lead counsel in the 2016 civil rights lawsuit against the Austin Police Department, placed a thick file onto the conference table. Across from her sat 4 representatives from Liberty Shield, a national civil rights organization. One was a retired federal judge. Another had previously served in the Department of Justice. Jade looked at them, her eyes steady, unblinking. "We have photographic evidence, video, audio recordings, and internal documents," she said calmly. "Minority families, many with military backgrounds, have been systematically surveilled, profiled, and threatened after moving into Southridge Springs, an affluent suburb." The silver-haired woman across the table, once a state prosecutor, flipped through the first few pages. Her gaze, cold at first, sharpened with each piece of evidence revealed. "There's clear coordination," she said quietly, "between local law enforcement and an extremist-linked neighborhood group. There's evidence of threats made toward minors and manipulation of child protective services to target select households." Jade slid a USB drive to the center of the table. "Inside is video footage of a police officer assaulting my brother in his own home. There are direct threats, and there are internal emails pulled legally under civilian cybersecurity access from Sentry Circle's network." A quiet man to her left finally asked, "Your brother, Damien Sullivan?" Jade nodded. "Former Tier 1 operator, served in Black Phantom, Bronze Star, 3 black deployments, twice wounded, honorably discharged due to post-war trauma." The room went still. Then the older attorney spoke. "I worked with the Department of Defense," he said slowly. "I know that name. When someone like Damien Sullivan is forced to step back, it's not because he's weakened. It's because the world no longer has the moral clarity to hold a warrior like that in uniform." Jade nodded quietly. "And that same man now faces losing custody of his daughter because he dared to push back against a diseased system." The meeting lasted until noon. When Jade stepped out of Liberty Shield's office, the sun was sharp overhead. She stopped just outside the door, pulled out her phone, and sent one simple message to Damien. "File's ready. They're in." She didn't wait for a reply. She knew he'd read it. That afternoon, the formal complaint was drafted. Plaintiff: Aria Sullivan. Legal representatives: Jade Sullivan and Damien Sullivan. Defendants: Southridge Springs Police Department, along with 3 named individuals, Officer Vickers, Officer Randall, and Lieutenant Pearson, who had direct familial ties to a CPS caseworker responsible for manipulating the custody file against Damien. Jade closed the file. But in her eyes, it wasn't a document. It was a weapon, and this time she wasn't fighting for some abstract ideal. She was fighting for a girl who had lost her mother, watched her therapy dog die right before her eyes. And somehow, I was still breathing. 6:22 p.m. Thursday evening. No rain. Damien was at the sink, washing dishes. He wore non-slip gloves, the kind that left no prints. The kitchen was quiet, save for the lingering scent of oregano and garlic from the unfinished pasta sauce. Echo was gone, but the ritual of dinner for Arya remained. Same time, same dish. Upstairs, water ran from the shower. Arya's room echoed with soft music, a piece she'd loved since she was little. Claire de Lune. Then the doorbell. 3 quick chimes. A pause. Then one long press. Damien checked the screen on his phone. The front camera feed blinked on. Vickers stood at the door, next to him. Randall, hands in his jacket pockets, that hollow, too-practiced grin on his face, the kind that looked like it came with a plastic mold. Damien wasn't surprised, and he wasn't afraid. He opened the door. "What do you want?" His tone was so level it bordered on eerie. "We just want to talk," Vickers said with a thin smile. "Off the record, that's okay?" Damien's eyes flicked toward the hidden camera mounted above the porch. A small blue LED blinked once, then went dark, recording as planned. He stepped aside. "Come in." Vickers entered first. His eyes darted subtly across the space like a tactician scanning for entry points, cover, exits. Randall followed, slower, but his eyes were razors. Damien closed the door. Every system in the house was live. 8 cameras, 2 high-sensitivity mics, and a separate hard drive, quietly humming behind a framed picture on the wall behind him. The living room was clean, neutral. Soft brown sofas. A low bookshelf held a mix of military manuals and children's picture books. On the coffee table sat a miniature model of the International Space Station, carefully assembled by Arya's own hands. Vickers sat down like a man used to being in charge. "I hear you're pursuing some rather aggressive legal actions," he said with a smug edge in his voice. "I'm protecting my daughter," Damien replied calmly. Randall glanced over. His eyes darkened. "By leaking fake videos and inviting the press into our community?" "I haven't leaked anything." Damien leaned back slightly. "But if you're nervous, maybe it's because you know what's on those files could cost some people their badges." Vickers gave a dry, humorless chuckle. "I've read your record, Sullivan. Tier 1, right? A guy like you should understand. Sometimes in the field, collateral damage is unavoidable." "Echo wasn't collateral," Damien said, his voice suddenly lower. "He was family, and no one shoots family, then comes into my home and talks like that." The room grew still. Randall leaned in, his tone a growl. "You're damaging the reputation of an entire department. If you keep going, there will be consequences." Damien didn't flinch. "Should I take that as a formal threat, or a personal one?" Vickers stood. "Call it a reminder, from 2 men who once believed in the law, that not everyone plays fair when they're cornered." Damien rose with him. "Good, because I didn't come here to play fair." For a beat, Randall took a half step forward. They were just inches apart now. No one moved. But every word, every gesture, every breath was recorded. Clear audio, full video. Enough to document an act of intimidation. inside a private home. As the two officers turned to leave, Vickers paused at the door, looked back, dropped his voice just enough for the camera to still pick it up. "You don't know what you're stirring up, Sullivan. Southridge isn't for people like you." Damien held his gaze. "I don't need Southridge. I just need the truth. And I'll dig it out, with my bare hands if I have to." Vickers gave a crooked smirk, then walked out. As the door clicked shut, Damien turned instantly toward the server. He pulled the hard drive, slotted it into an encrypted encoder, and started the transfer. The footage was duplicated into 3 identical files, one sent to Jade, one uploaded to Liberty Shield's secure server, the third compressed and stored inside a hidden cloud account hosted on an anonymous server out of Iceland. Once done, Damien sat down, pulled out his phone, typed a message to Jade. Trap set. Video's enough to start the next war. 18 hours later, a cloudless Monday morning. Arya sat at the table, swinging her legs as she nibbled peanut butter toast and sipped from a glass of milk. Then, the doorbell. 3 short rings. A pause. One long press. Damien was slicing fruit in the kitchen. He looked up. That same knock pattern again. He set the knife down, wiped his hands on a dry cloth, walked to the front door. The camera screen lit up. A woman stood outside, gray blouse, hair in a tight bun, folder in hand. Beside her, a man in a navy suit, eyes deliberately avoiding the lens. Damien opened the door. "Good morning," the woman said, holding up an ID. "Dina Walsh, Child Protective Services, Montgomery County. This is my colleague, Mr. Clarence Patel. We're here to investigate an anonymous report concerning possible endangerment of a minor." Damien didn't blink. That was fast. "Come in," he said evenly. But with his left hand hidden from view, he tapped a button on his phone to activate internal recording. The 2 officials stepped inside. "We'll need to speak to you privately," Dina said, "and perform a brief inspection of the child's living conditions." They used Arya's full name. Not the child, not your daughter. That told Damien one thing. They had access to the file. He nodded. "Arya, sweetheart, head upstairs for some homework, okay?" Arya looked at him. Alert, her eyes searched his. "What's going on, Dad?" "Nothing serious, just a routine check." "Take your headphones with you, yeah?" She picked up her glass and walked up the stairs without another word. But that last glance she gave him was not the look of a child who felt safe. It was the look of someone who knew something was wrong. Dina opened the folder. The report states that the child resides with a former combat veteran diagnosed with PTSD, has a history of aggressive behavior during training, and shows patterns of paranoia toward law enforcement personnel. Additionally, the report claims the child was left alone for extended periods, has been isolated from formal education systems, and is at risk for psychological distress. Damien leaned lightly against the chair. "And the reporter's identity?" "We are legally required to maintain confidentiality," Dina answered smoothly. Clarence Patel still hadn't said a word, but his gaze lingered, just a beat too long, on the bookshelf, right where Damien had intentionally placed a few military memoirs and a declassified Pentagon white paper, just enough to provoke assumptions. "I'm prepared to provide Area's full academic records, therapy certifications, and regular health checkups," Damien said calmly. "We also maintain 24/7 security camera footage. If needed, I can show you every recorded moment from the past 30 days. Dina stopped writing. "We'll need to speak with Arya's current therapist to confirm those claims. If there are any delays or non-compliance, the agency may have to consider a temporary removal to ensure child safety. Damien raised an eyebrow. Consider? That word, the government's favorite euphemism for seizure, sanitized for bureaucratic decorum. He exhaled slowly. Arya lost her mother to terminal cancer. She's still recovering from trauma after witnessing her therapy dog die in front of her. Your unannounced visit right now could seriously disrupt her treatment progress. Clarence finally spoke. Mr. Sullivan, we didn't come here to be adversaries. But when a child is in a home that others believe might be unsafe, we're obligated to act. Damien stood. Then I'd like copies of the documents authorizing child access, environmental inspection, and all related paperwork. I'll forward them to my attorney today. Dina handed him a folder. He didn't open it, just noted the red county seal. Montgomery County. It was official. Procedural. Within jurisdiction. But it was the wrong moment. They left after nearly 30 minutes of note-taking and inspection. Damien walked them to the door, silent. Once their car vanished down the street, he returned to his office and called Jade. I'm here, she answered. They've shifted fronts, Damien said, from the police to child services. The target's no longer me, it's Arya. There was a brief pause on the line. Then Jade's voice, clipped and low. They're going dirty. Damien looked toward the stairs. Arya was sitting there, pretending to study, but her headphones had been off the entire time. She looked up. Their eyes met. And in that gaze, Damien saw something he hadn't seen in years. The reflection of his younger self. That same look he once gave a superior officer when he realized the battlefield wasn't always out there. Sometimes, it was inside the very home you thought would keep you safe. Damien sat across from Arya. She didn't look away from him. Are they going to take me away? Her voice was soft, but no longer innocent. No one is taking you anywhere, Damien said. Not while I'm here? Arya gave a faint nod, but the doubt didn't leave her eyes. Damien knew. Words weren't enough. He'd have to prove it. That afternoon, he called Arya's therapist, Doctor. Maureen Halbrook, the woman who had walked beside her since Eleanor's death. She answered on the second ring. I had a feeling you'd be calling, she said gently. I just got an urgent notice from CPS. They're asking for a re-evaluation of Arya's psychological condition. Very unusual timing. Damien explained what had happened. They're trying to cloud the legal case with a layer of psychological fog, Dr. Halbrook exhaled, not surprised. I'll file a complete report, full assessments, clinical notes, documented progress. But there's something you need to know. What is it? Arya's been making strong progress, but a surprise evaluation, if she's unprepared, could set her back. Deeply. Damien clenched his jaw. Then what do we do? There was a pause. Bring her in, Doctor, Halbrook said. Not for evaluation, for grounding, for control. If Arya understands what's happening, if she's part of the process, not a target of it, she won't feel powerless. Damien agreed without hesitation. For the next 3 mornings, Arya sat in that warm little therapy room. No uniform, no backpack, just a girl surrounded by smiling charts and wooden dogs, safe beneath the amber light of safety. Dr. Halbrook never asked about Echo, never brought up the shooting. She asked about galaxies, about stars, about the maps Arya once drew with her mother on cloudy nights. And slowly, Arya spoke again. Not much, but enough. On the 3rd night, Damien saw her at the dinner table with a folded stack of old paper's maps of constellations she'd once hidden away after the funeral. Orion, Cygnus, Andromeda. She tilted her head toward a dot. This one, she whispered. "Mom used to call it the way home." Damien didn't speak. He just sat beside her. A moment passed. Then Arya looked up. "If they ask me questions, I won't say anything bad about you, but what if they twist it? What if they try to make it sound wrong?" Damien looked into her eyes. "When someone wants to twist the truth, there's no convincing them. But there's a better way. Let the truth speak for itself." He stood. I walked to the safe, took out a sealed envelope. Inside, every medical report, therapy note, surveillance record, and legal affidavit. All indexed, all verified, all backed by Liberty Shield. "This," Damien said, placing it in front of her, "is your armor." Arya blinked. "And the weapon?" she asked, voice steady, but with a glint of something fierce beneath. Damien didn't answer right away. He rested a hand on her shoulder. "You are," he said softly. "Your voice, your breath. The fact that you're still here, still thinking, still standing. That's the weapon. You're the living proof of everything we're fighting for." Arya looked up, nodded, just once. That night, Damien didn't sleep. He sat outside her bedroom door, watching the live stream feed from the camera over the front gate. Every shadow, every passing car, every shift in the wind, he heard it all. He had once survived the battlefield. Now, he faced a war far harder, where enemies didn't wear uniforms, and bullets were law books, accusations, and bureaucratic knives. But Damien didn't flinch. Because this time, there was no commander, no chain of command, just him and his daughter. Damien reopened a file from the hidden ceiling camera, the one in the living room. It played crystal clear, direct angle, clean audio. Vickers and Randall, standing like statues, cold-eyed, calculating. Damien rewound to the part where Randall spoke. "Southridge isn't for people like you." Simple words, but loaded with implication. Body language, smugness, threat. "You don't belong here. No one wants you here." He kept watching. "We've got friends in social services, people in the town council. If you think a few videos are going to help you win, you don't understand the system, Sullivan." That was Vickers, walking past the family portrait, running his fingers along the frame with Arya and Echo in it. His eyes dripped with contempt. "Even your dog didn't belong here," he added. Even Randall flinched at that. But he said nothing. Did nothing. Damien paused the footage. Just that sentence, just that single moment, would be enough to tear off the mask in front of any journalist, any judge, any jury. Damien marked the timestamp. Then played the next part, the one where Randall gripped his shoulder hard, leaned in, and spoke with a voice low but laced with open threat. "Don't let this get out of control, and don't let the girl see things she shouldn't see." On screen, Damien didn't flinch, didn't jerk, didn't respond. He just stood there, still as stone. But somehow that stillness said more than any words could. It made everything plain. Who was threatening who? Who was the victim? Who held the strings? Damien powered down the screen, inserted the USB into a backup laptop, sent the clip to Jade and Liberty Shield with one single note. "Here's the bait. Time to burn the hive." Less than 2 hours later, Jade called back on video. "Are you sure you want to drop all of this now?" she asked, tension tight across her brow. "Not all," Damien replied, "but they need to know what we have. We're past defense. We're playing offense now." Jade sat silent for a few seconds. Then, "How do you think they'll respond?" "Panic," Damien said. "And when you face panicked people, that's when you see who they really are." That night, Damien uploaded a trimmed 32-second clip to an anonymous account. He tagged a handful of independent journalists and left only one line in the caption. "The story in Southridge hasn't started, but this is how it will end." Within an hour, the video went viral. Journalists started calling Jade, social media caught fire, and the question echoed. What could a suburban police department possibly be hiding to justify this? A few blocks away, Randall shattered a beer glass against the wall. Vickers said nothing. But deep inside, he knew this was no longer about control. This was survival. And meanwhile, in another world, one untouched by strategy and power games, Arya Sullivan curled up beneath a galaxy-shaped nightlight. Stars shimmered on her ceiling, but none of them were bright enough to pierce the darkness in her heart. Earlier that day, she had seen them. Two men in gray dress shirts, clean ties, stepping out of a car with unfamiliar plates. They carried no weapons, didn't shout, didn't storm in. But Arya knew. They weren't the good kind. Her dad had closed the door behind them, but through the cracks she'd caught words fragments like glass underfoot. Investigation, safety, unstable mental condition, and worst of all, temporary removal for the child's protection. Removal, child, as if she were a thing, something to be taken, without asking if she even wanted to go. She didn't cry, didn't scream. She just walked to her room, clutched the old collar Echo used to wear. Her dad had kept it for her still with a few strands of fur clinging to the metal tag. She breathed in, but the scent was fading. Like Echo, was afraid to return, because even he knew this world wasn't safe anymore. That night, Damien didn't sit in the living room. He brought a pillow, pulled up a blanket, and sat beside her bed. Arya didn't speak, just turned away, facing the wall, still holding Echo's collar tight in her hand. Damien said nothing. He rested his hand on hers, and kept it there. For a long, long time. In that quiet, he felt it. His own fear, not from war, not from bullets, but from helplessness. He had survived sniper fire from 800 meters, waded through flooded tunnels in Kandahar with nothing but a broken radio and a sidearm, held dying friends in his arms. But never not once had Damien Sullivan felt as powerless as when his daughter lay there, silent and breaking. "I won't let them take you," he whispered. "Not the government. Not God." The small fingers under his palm twitched, a faint reflex, but it told him. She was still listening, still believing, even if hope was a tired thing now. Outside the window, Southridge lay still, peaceful, artificial. But inside that room, between a father and his child, a battle had already begun. Not with guns, but with promises, with pain, with shared fear, and with a will that would not be moved. The next morning, Damien woke with a stiff back from sleeping upright on the wooden chair. But he didn't move. Because Arya, for the first time in days, had fallen asleep peacefully. Her hand is still in his. Echo was gone, but the instinct to protect it remained, alive in every breath, in every unspoken vow he'd poured into her dreams. And as Arya turned in her sleep, a small smile brushed her swollen, tear-streaked face. And for Damien, that was his first victory of the day. Damien rose from the chair, gently pulling the blanket over Arya's shoulder, then quietly closed the door behind him. Outside, dawn was breaking. That soft, silver-gray light filtered through the windows, like the world was trying to start over. Even if nothing inside the human heart felt new. Damien walked into the kitchen and brewed a strong cup of coffee. The grinder hummed through the quiet house. He hadn't checked his phone all night. But now, the blinking screen tugged at him another front, another battlefield. Only this time, the strategy wasn't to shoot or to hide. It was to speak, to write, to prove. A message from Jade. Someone wants to meet. You can trust her. Captain Marissa Flint. Damien's brow furrowed. Flint was a name he'd heard before, one of the few high-ranking black officers in the state, known for her iron backbone, her discipline, her silence. He typed back, "Not a setup?" Jade replied, "No." She reached out and started with a line I'll never forget. The meeting took place in a quiet civil rights law office Jade often worked with. No flags, no logos, just white walls, a long wooden table, and files stacked from one end to the other. Marissa Flint entered with the steady gait of someone who didn't need introductions. Plain civilian attire, tight bun, no makeup. But something in her eyes made people sit up straighter. Jade stood to greet her with a handshake. Marissa nodded, then looked her straight in the eye. "I stand with you." No warm-up, no testing the waters. Jade sat slowly. "You know that saying those words could cost you everything." Marissa looked around the room at the faded posters about civil rights, the framed losses, the desperate petitions pinned beside court transcripts. Then she said, voice low but sure, "I've lost plenty already, Ms. Sullivan. Teammates, promotions, peace. But I've never lost my self-respect, and I don't intend to start now." Jade slid a thick folder across the table. Marissa opened it and scanned quickly names of families surveilled, patterns of intimidation, internal letters from Sentry Circle. A few names made her eyebrows tighten. She flipped to the last page stills from Damien's living room camera. Vickers. Randall. That one line, "Southridge isn't for people like you." Marissa closed the folder. Her gaze met Jade's not with doubt, but solidarity. "This goes deeper than I thought," she said. "And I know if I don't act now, I might never get another chance." Jade nodded. "You're not alone. There are others in the system like you, but they're scared. They stay quiet." Marissa's voice was calm. "They have every right to be afraid. But not all of us can afford silence." Then she looked straight at Jade. "I'm done being quiet." At that moment, Damien walked in. He said nothing, just sat across from Marissa and nodded once, enough to say thank you, enough to promise commitment. Marissa met his gaze. "I'm not here to earn your trust, Mr. Sullivan. I came to say I will be the inside link you need. I know who's covering, who's misdirecting, and I also know, if we wait for the system to fix itself, there won't be another echo that makes it out alive." Damien's voice was low. "Where do we start?" Marissa answered, "With a list. A list of those straddling the line, and I'll tell you who's friend and whose betrayal." After the meeting, Damien didn't go straight home. He took a longer route driving past the school Aria once dreamed of attending, where the old observatory still stood rusted and crooked, but beautiful. And he thought, if this ends right, I'll take her here someday, so she can look at the sky without fearing what lives beneath it. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A message from Marissa. "Sending the first list, but be careful. One of them sat next to me for 10 years. Damien pulled over and opened his laptop. The file wasn't heavy because of its size, but because of the weight each name carried. Line 1. Pearson, Gregory Lieutenant, Southridge Springs PD. Relation. Brother-in-law of District Councilman. Line 2. Cole, Raymond Deputy Director of HR, Southridge PD. Former member of Southern Heritage League, once linked to racial intimidation. Line 3. Damien clenched the mouse. Hanley Margot, Director of Child Protective Services, Southridge. Authorized investigation into Damien Sullivan. Relation, cousin to Gregory Pearson. A network, not coincidence. But it wasn't just a coincidence. It was a structure, tightly woven, rooted deep, greased by fear and maintained by power. Damien closed his eyes for a few seconds. Not because he was tired, but because he needed a moment to force the rage back down to where it belonged. Now wasn't the time for fury. It was time for the cold mind of a strategist. He opened a digital map of Southridge, marked key areas, homes, workplaces, habitual routes of every name on the list. Then he forwarded the file to Jade, adding one note. Rally the media. A special event is coming to Southridge. Start calling reporters. A few minutes later, Marissa's message lit up the screen. Here's the part you won't want to believe. Interim Chief of Police Donald K. Reeves is part of Sentry Circle. He issued internal memos about preserving community cultural standards. I'm trying to confirm more. Damien leaned back. Night air slipped through a cracked window. He thought of Aria, of the look in her eyes when she stood over Echo's body, of her hands curled around his each night, terrified that if she blinked the good things might vanish again. Number he couldn't back down. If the chief was involved, that meant things were 10 times more dangerous. But it also meant if he hit the right link, the whole system could collapse. That night, in a cafe 5 blocks from Southridge's municipal center, Damien met Marissa again. She arrived 3 minutes late. Just enough to remind him she still played by the system's rules, but no longer believed in its timeline. She slid a folder across the table, handwritten on the cover in bold black ink. The Convergence. He opened it. Inside was a web of names and positions: law enforcement, public administrators, church representatives, even members of the school board. But one name made Damien stop turning pages. Judge Ann Kessler, Southridge Municipal Court. Marissa nodded. She dismissed every discrimination claim against the department, every single one. For 7 years. Damien didn't speak, just pressed the record button on his phone. Marissa went on. This is the kind of thing no journalist can touch unless someone inside's willing to burn their own bridge. I don't burn bridges, Damien said. I build new roads, and I've got explosives ready. That night, Damien returned home. Aria was watching a launch video, eyes sparkling as the shuttle lifted from Earth. When she saw her father enter, she turned and asked, "Do you think people can live where there's no gravity?" Damien sat beside her, brushing a hand through her hair. "I think you can live anywhere, sweetheart, as long as you're free." She smiled. A real one. Fragile, but real. And for Damien, that one moment meant more than any battlefield victory he'd ever known. A buzz came from the office. Damien gave Aria a nod to keep watching and stepped away, gently closing the door. The screen showed a name he never ignored, Marissa Flint. He answered. Her breathing was uneven. "I can't go home tonight," she said. "Someone smashed my car window, left a message taped to the driver's seat." "What did it say?" Damien asked, voice shifting from calm to sharp in an instant. "Traitors don't get roofs." She read it slowly, as if every word scraped her throat. "I turned over the evidence to Internal Affairs. I thought I was making progress, but I forgot one thing." "What?" "They have people inside, maybe more than I realized." Damien didn't ask more. He knew that feeling, when there's no one behind you, and only a cliff ahead. "Where are you?" "A small hotel east of the city. I haven't told my mother yet. I don't want to scare her." Damien opened a drawer, pulled out another USB, a second backup of all Sentry Circle documents. He knew if this fell into the wrong hands, It wouldn't just be Marissa at risk. You shouldn't be alone. Wait 10 minutes, I'll come. No, Damien, I didn't call for help. I just wanted you to know I'm not backing down. Neither am I. Silence. Through the line, he could hear her shoes scraping tile. The sound of fear. Pacing. I walked into this with my eyes open, she said softly, but I didn't expect them to go this far. Damien grabbed his jacket, checked his firearm, a registered pistol with a suppressor from his Tier 1 days. He had no intention of using it. But he wouldn't leave her to face wolves alone, carrying a candle in the dark. Marissa, he cut in gently, you're the only voice on the inside who can rattle this machine, but you won't carry that weight alone. She laughed, faintly, weary. You say that like you've never carried it before. I have. For my country, for ideals. But this time, I carry it for my daughter, for Echo, and for every child who'll never have to lose their best friend again. Marissa didn't respond. But in her silence was every answer that mattered. But as Damien stepped out the door, he already knew. Her silence was an answer, the kind filled not with fear, but with unwavering consent. On his way to the hotel, Damien called Jade. Prep a witness protection motion for Marissa. Call Liberty Shield. What happened? The gun's been cocked. A beat of silence. Then Jade's voice sharpened with urgency. Then it's time. I've already set up an interview with a journalist from BHR. If you can keep Marissa safe, I'll handle the rest. Damien gave a small nod, knowing she couldn't see it, but feeling like she would understand anyway. Just make sure Arya doesn't see the news. Not yet. I promise. When he arrived, Marissa was seated alone at a window on the second floor of a modest roadside hotel. She wasn't crying, she wasn't trembling. She was cold, like someone who knew that after tonight, there would be no turning back. I brought coffee, Damien said, setting the cup down gently. She gave a half smile. Cold coffee and a fugitive soul. My life's starting to feel like a bad B-movie. The thing is, Damien sat beside her, voice steady. B-movies usually end with the main character surviving. Marissa held his gaze for a long, quiet moment. So, you think we'll survive? Damien didn't blink, didn't hesitate. No. We'll win. Southridge Springs. 2 a.m., an old pickup truck slowed to a crawl near the edge of a quiet residential street. A man stepped out, carrying a small black case, unmarked, unbranded, just a heavy slab of steel filled with truths no one wanted to see. Damien popped the latch. Inside, a dual-frequency transmitter, 2 tubular wall-mounted infrared cameras, and a single-use remote trigger. This wasn't surveillance gear. This was proof. Every frame it captured would beam straight to an encrypted server located in the San Francisco office of a human rights organization. Jade had secured the uplink. Liberty Shield had agreed to back it. Everything was in place. Damien mounted the first camera under the left eave, with a direct line of sight to the front gate. The second he hid in the wooden mailbox angled perfectly down the stone walkway, right where he suspected Vickers would come if he returned. No official warrant had been filed yet. But Damien knew. Men like Vickers didn't sit still when cornered. Their ego always brought them back. And this time, someone would be watching. Later that morning, Jade walked into a downtown legal office, carrying a thick stack of papers. The red-bordered folder on top bore a crisp federal heading. Class action suit, violation of federal civil rights, abuse of power, criminalization of minority residents. Attached was a list of 27 names, not just victims, witnesses. Her associate looked up. Are you sure you want to send this? Jade didn't answer. She tapped her phone and typed just 3 words. "It's time." Then she nodded. "Send it." That afternoon, Damien sat across from Marissa Flint in a small cafe beside an old firehouse. Sunlight poured through the windows, casting fractured gold across the worn tabletop. "You think they'll act fast?" he asked quietly. Marissa sipped her coffee. "With everything Jade's handed over, the press will explode in 36 hours. And when that happens, Vickers won't be an officer anymore. He'll be a suspect waiting to get exposed." Damien nodded slowly. "Let's see who makes the first move." As if on cue, his phone buzzed. A message, no text, just a 12-second clip. Vickers, standing at the end of the road, staring at Damien's house, 30 feet from the hidden camera, but close enough to see the outline of a pistol in his coat. The war was no longer brewing. It had begun. Randall stepped out from the passenger seat, disheveled, half-buttoned shirt, breath still soaked in whiskey. He didn't bother pretending this time. No fake smiles, no rehearsed lines. The gate to Damien's yard was ajar. Not locked, just slightly shut. They walked across the stone path. Motion lights flicked on. A secondary beam, silent and precise, lit their faces like a stage performance. Perfect lighting, perfect angle, enough for any jury to see. Inside, Damien stood from his chair. Calm, controlled, recording is already running. A blue LED no larger than a pinhead pulsed quietly inside the ceiling vent. Every footstep, every breath, every word. Captured. 3 knocks at the door. Sharp, hollow, like nails tapping a coffin lid. Damien opened it. Vickers gave a hollow smile. No greeting. No games. "You filed the suit. Feds are reviewing. Media's calling. The problem is, we don't think you understand the consequences of that." Damien tilted his head, eyes calm, like a man listening to someone explain the orbit of Mars. "I understand the consequences, but I also understand the law." Randall scoffed. His lip curled, voice thick with venom. "Law only protects the ones white enough to be worth protecting." The words dropped like a blade, and that was the first shot on record. Damien stepped back. "Come in." They did. But the moment Randall stepped over the threshold, Damien shut the door behind them. A single click echoed through the house. Cold. Final. The sound of a trap locking into place. Inside the living room, everything was in its place. The leather couch, the low glass coffee table, the bookshelf behind it, and above it all, a camera disguised inside the ticking clock on the wall. Randall flopped onto the couch, reclining like he owned the place. Vickers stayed on his feet, arms crossed over his chest. "We heard, you've got a history of instability, after the war." Damien said nothing. "We also heard your daughter's not doing too well either. Nightmares, anxiety, scared of sirens." Still silence. "Seems to me, a father like you might not be the best environment for a child." That's when, for the first time, the camera caught a flicker of emotion on Damien's face. It wasn't anger, it was pain, like someone had spoken aloud a death that hadn't been buried yet. Randall stood. "You drop the lawsuit, or your daughter gets a new life, somewhere far away from you." Damien looked up, and for the first time since Echo fell, his voice emerged. Low, slow, sharp like cold steel. "I don't think you understand who you're standing in front of. So let me be clear, I've been through Fallujah, Mosul, Kandahar. I've fought on days I didn't know if I'd be alive to see the next, and the only thing that kept me breathing was the belief that if I didn't stand, no one would." Randall clenched his fists. Vickers reached into his coat, pulled out his phone. The air thickened. so thick even a breath could set off a war. Damien stepped forward. You can break the law, you can twist the system, but you can't erase the truth. Not from the video, I have it. Every threat, every word you said. And I don't need to lift a finger. All I need is to send the file at the right time. Vickers frozen. His eyes darted. He understood. Too late. Damien opened the door. Get out. I've got a child who deserves to sleep tonight. And neither of you belong in her dreams. No more words. They stepped out. The camera kept recording. The board was reset. But this time the loser wouldn't just lose. He'd have nowhere left to hide. When the door finally shut, Damien stayed still. Didn't move. Didn't breathe deep. Just stood in the silence, listening to the wind rustle through the yard outside. He didn't turn around. He didn't have to. Because from the edge of the staircase above, a pair of eyes had seen it all. Aria. She stood at the place where shadow met light, right between the hallway and the last step. Hair messy, eyes wide, no tears, no fear, just silence. A silence that hurt more than any of her screams the night echo died. She didn't ask, who were they? She didn't ask, what happened? Because she knew. Because she had seen. Damien walked slowly toward the base of the stairs. No rush, no forced bravado, no attempt to hide the weariness etched deep into the lines of his face after too many sleepless nights. Aria watched him. And for the first time in days, she spoke. Will they come back? Damien looked up. His voice was gravel and ash. Maybe. Aria paused, then repeated softer but heavier. Will they come back, Dad? Damien nodded. Slow. Truthful. Yes. But next time, they won't come like hunters. He stepped closer. They'll come like animals cornered because now they're the ones who are afraid. Aria nodded faintly, then turned. I walked back toward her room. No tears, no trembling. But Damien knew something had shifted inside her. A scratch, now carved into the surface of her spirit. She wasn't just the little girl dreaming about planets and rocket ships anymore. She was something else now. Someone smaller, who had no choice but to grow up too fast. Damien returned to his study. He sat. He pulled up the footage from just moments ago. Randall's eyes, Vickers' words, every breath held like a blade in the grip of veiled threats. Crystal clear. He had no reason left to wait. The video was encrypted and sent one copy to Jade, one to the journalist who'd covered Carlton's case, one to Liberty Shield, and the final copy to the Office of Federal Oversight. Attached was a single line of text. If I don't respond in 24 hours, release everything. Damien shut off the screen. When he stepped out of the room, the light from the hallway spilled across the staircase, the same spot where Aria had stood. Now empty, but still holding warmth. The scar had formed, and from this moment on he was no longer fighting to retaliate. He was fighting to protect what was left in the heart of a child, still trying to believe in safety. Damien lifted his head. It was time to step into the light. That morning, inside the headquarters of Liberty Shield, the organization dedicated to victims of institutional abuse, Jade Sullivan stepped into the conference room, holding the official federal complaint in her hands. Her white shirt was wrinkled from staying up all night. Her eyes were rimmed in fatigue, not from crying, but from combing through every clause in federal law, every statute protecting minors, every precedent used in civil rights suits against law enforcement. On the large screen behind her was a diagram, the one they now called the South Ridge Web. Top left, a photo of Vickers. Top right, Randall. Both linked to Lieutenant Pearson, the man who had directly authorized the illegal CPS investigation. And in the center of the web, a red circle with 3 arrows pointing inward. Sentry Circle. Beneath that, a list of 27 names. Black veterans. Families of color who had moved into Southridge over the last 5 years. 11 cited for traffic violations. 5 were subjected to random searches. 2 who filed complaints, all of which were dismissed. Jade didn't need to look at the board again. She closed her eyes, placed one hand on the folder clutched tight in her grip, and spoke with a voice that didn't shake. We are filing a federal lawsuit, citing charges of abuse of authority, racial discrimination, violation of civil liberties, infringement on child protective statutes, witness intimidation, and coordinated concealment of institutional misconduct. The lead attorney at Liberty Shield gave a firm nod. A button was pressed. The lawsuit, along with video footage from Damien's confrontation, leaked documents from Sentry Circle, audio from Malik Tyson, and reports from Marissa Flint, was sent simultaneously to the U.S. Attorney's Office, the FBI, and the Federal Oversight Committee on Law Enforcement. 3 hours later, Damien got the call. A steady, no-nonsense voice came through the line. Mr. Sullivan, this is Special Agent Roy Sanders with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We've received the submission filed by Attorney Jade Sullivan, and I want you to know, a federal inquiry has officially been opened. Damien sat still in his office. His hand rested on a photograph of Echo lying beside Aria, in a moment of peace that now felt like it belonged to another lifetime. Thank you, Damien said. But I'm not looking for gratitude. I want the truth, and I want the people who killed my daughter's dog to stand in front of a jury. You'll have that, sir, Agent Sanders replied, and we want the same thing. By late afternoon, headlines began to ripple across the news. Southridge Springs accused of harboring organized racial targeting. Local police department tied to far-right group. Veteran sues police over death of daughter's therapy dog. And beneath the bold text, the first image that made its way onto screens across the country. A 12-year-old girl in a NASA sweatshirt, sitting next to a German shepherd bathed in the golden light of an afternoon sun. Her gaze didn't smile, didn't cry. It simply looked straight through the camera. No caption was needed, because all of America saw it. What was at risk, and what was choosing to stand up. Jade looked down at her phone and sent a message to Damien. It's begun. There's no turning back now. Damien read it, then looked up. He was sitting beside Aria, who had fallen asleep on the couch, worn out after her therapy session. Her eyes were still a little swollen, but for the first time in weeks, her lashes rested gently in sleep. Not in tension. Damien tightened his hand around hers. No words, no need to turn back. Only forward now. 6 a.m. Marissa Flint stood before the mirror. She adjusted her tie, clipped the badge onto her chest. No makeup, no need. The only light she carried today was the truth. In the left pocket of her blazer, she carried a document just received from the CIA, a record of regular wire transfers from an entity called the Foundation for Community Integrity into a series of shadow accounts in Southridge. Those accounts funded none other than the Southridge Security Council. The internal code name? Sentry Circle. The budget breakdown included chilling line items, surveillance expenses for tracking non-native residents, equipment for community-level behavioral monitoring, regular training for ex-military members still mission-capable, and most damning of all, psychological support for officers who experienced distress after using force in civilian operations. Marissa placed the file on the conference table. Across from her sat 6 familiar faces, 6 officers of Southridge PD. One had mentored her in the academy. One had invited her to dinner at his home. One had stood beside her during the fallen officer's memorial. Today, she was signing arrest orders for all 6. That afternoon, black SUVs with no license plates pulled into the parking lot of the Southridge Police Department. Federal agents stepped out. At the front of the column was Marissa Flint, dressed in plain clothes. No badge, no insignia, nothing that could label her a traitor from within. One by one, the officers were separated. No weapons drawn, no cuffs dropped. Just silence. But the sound it made was deafening. Vickers was arrested while signing documents at his desk. Randall was taken in from the parking lot just as he arrived for his shift. Pearson, the lieutenant tied to the CPS case, was pulled from his office while drafting a surveillance report on a newly moved-in Asian family. Simultaneously, the FBI executed warrants across 5 suspected paramilitary training locations connected to Sentry Circle. In one abandoned warehouse, they found semi-automatic weapons crisis simulation gear, training manuals titled Urban Disruption and Minority Risk Management. That evening, Marissa received a call from Agent Roy Sanders. "We've confirmed it. Sentry Circle is a covert offshoot of the White Sentinel Initiative, a domestic extremist group previously linked to racially motivated attacks in 3 southern states." Marissa didn't respond immediately. She was standing in the hallway at headquarters, watching as 3 officers in civilian clothes were led out in silence. A tech officer and an older black man from maintenance passed by. He dipped his head low as he walked past her, and kept walking fast, as if hiding his emotion. Marissa's hand touched her badge. Then she turned back to her desk. Waiting there was a photograph. Aria and Echo, and a line scribbled in a child's handwriting from the letter Aria had sent Liberty Shield. "I just don't want anyone else to lose their only friend, without someone to protect them." Marissa pressed her lips together. Today, someone had protected me. That night, local news and national outlets flooded the airwaves. Southridge Springs, once hailed as Model American Community, now at center of federal probe. Systemic abuse, racism, and concealed operations alleged in suburban town. Federal arrests begin in Southridge as links to extremist groups emerge. Damien turned on the television, but he didn't look at the screen. His eyes were on his daughter. Aria was curled up under her moon-shaped nightlight, finally asleep, breath even, eyes calm. No Echo. But at the foot of her bed, Nova, their new German shepherd pup, was curled tightly, tail twitching. Not a replacement, a continuation. 3 a.m. Damien's phone buzzed. Not an alarm, not a headline, a message from Jade. "The FBI wants Aria to testify. Likely closed hearing, but she has to be present." He stared at the screen, then slowly placed the phone down. The war wasn't over, but the tide had turned. Damien sat up. The soft glow from the laptop screen carved deep lines across his forehead, not lines of age, but of silence hardened by too many wars fought for too long. He stepped out onto the balcony, dialed a number not saved in any contact list, just memorized, because some names weren't meant to be stored. They were meant to be trusted. Southridge, Priority Level 2. Start tomorrow morning. Task, 24/7 witness protection. 12-year-old girl. On the other end, there was no hesitation, no questions, just one answer. Understood. The next morning, when Aria was told, she didn't speak for the first 10 seconds. Then she looked directly at Damien. "If I don't go, will it all stop?" Damien sat beside her, nodded gently. "Maybe, but it wouldn't be right." Aria bit her lip, glancing at Nova, who was chewing on a fuzzy slipper like nothing in the world had changed. "What will they ask me?" What you saw, what you remember, and why do you think it was wrong?" Arya nodded. Then, almost out of nowhere, she asked, "If Echo were still alive, what do you think he'd do?" Damien didn't need to think. Echo would stand between you and whatever scared you, no matter who it was. Arya fell quiet. Then she turned her face and said slowly, "Then I'll do it for Echo. But not just for him. For every other dog that won't be killed again, just because it was too big or made someone uncomfortable." The witness training lasted 3 days. A senior FBI investigator came to Damien's house personally to prepare Arya. She taught her how to manage her emotions, how to ask for a pause if questions came too fast, how to keep her ground without ever needing to raise her voice. Jade stayed for the entire first session, jotting down notes on every response. She watched Arya like she was watching a younger version of herself, back when she stood in court for the first time in a prison discrimination case that changed the trajectory of her life. She remembered the cold in her fingers, the trembling in her chest. But looking at Arya, there was no fear, just something deeper. A loyalty you couldn't quite name. To a 4-legged friend who no longer walked beside her, but who never once left her heart. On the day of the testimony, Damien walked beside his daughter, not as a Tier 1 operator, but as a father. A father walking beside a girl brave enough to turn pain into purpose. 3 plainclothes officers were already stationed at the courthouse. Nova waited in the back room with her own handler, ready to wag her tail the moment Arya walked back out of that door. Inside the interview room, the lighting was soft. No jury, just a federal prosecutor, a civil attorney, an FBI agent, and a camera. We're here to hear the testimony of Arya Sullivan, 12 years old, daughter of the lead plaintiff in the Southridge Springs case, and the legal handler of a therapy dog named Echo, shot and killed during the incident on September 17th. Arya looked up, and she began to speak. No stutters, no breaks, no faltering voice. And when she finished before they excused her from the witness chair, she asked politely if she could say one more thing. Everyone waited. Then, in a steady voice, she said, "If anyone ever believed that a dog doesn't know how to love, then they should ask a child who lost her mother and had only one being left who was willing to die to protect her." No one asked a follow-up question. None were needed. Because in that room, for the first time in a long time, truth had nothing left to prove. The formal hearing took place in a federal courtroom, tucked in the center of the state, under sterile white lights, and a silence so taut it felt like the law itself had been holding its breath, waiting for the truth. Jade Sullivan sat in the front row, eyes locked on the defendant board, Southridge Springs Police Department, Officer Vickers, Officer Randall, Lieutenant Pearson. Beside her, Damien Sullivan wore a plain black suit. No medals, no insignia, no rank. But when he took the stand, the courtroom shifted like the moment just before a storm breaks. He didn't carry notes, didn't bring documents. He brought one thing only: the weight of being a soldier and the pain of being a father. "I served this country for 19 years, Damien began, voice low but steady. "On many fronts, under many flags. But I've never seen a battlefield shaped like a porch, with white walls and flower beds, where I once believed my daughter would be safe." He paused. "My daughter Arya is a child who likes to look up at the stars, and her dog, Echo, was the only thing that could help her sleep after her mother died of cancer." Another pause. His voice deepened. "The day Echo was shot, I was overseas on an intelligence mission. I've seen plenty of people die, but I've never seen a 12-year-old girl dragged from the bloody body of her best friend, only to be interrogated without a parent present." No one moved. No one even breathed. I was trained not to react to insults. I was taught to control myself in the face of injustice. But when a system labels me a potential threat simply for demanding justice for my child..." He lifted his head, stared at the defendants. "Then every theory about emotional regulation loses all meaning." His voice didn't crack, it sharpened. "I don't ask for revenge. I ask for one thing, that no child should grow up haunted by the image of their dog being shot, wondering if it was their fault, and being told it was reasonable because he was too big or looked dangerous." He turned toward the judge. "Because if we do nothing today, tomorrow there'll be more names, more Echoes, more Arias, and then you will have to look into the eyes of your children and explain why you stood by." Damien stepped down. No further words needed, and the courtroom stood. Not out of formality, but because they knew some speeches don't belong in law books. They belong in our hearts. 3 days later, the verdict was delivered. Officer Vickers, guilty. Civil rights violations, falsified justifications for use of force, and unjustified killing of a certified service animal. Officer Randall, guilty. Complicity, obstruction of justice, and willful misconduct. Lieutenant Pearson, guilty. Abuse of power, collusion with civil services, and manipulation of case files related to vulnerable minors. The jury further recommended prosecution of 6 additional officers linked to the extremist group known as Sentry Circle. When the judge's gavel fell, Aria didn't smile, didn't cry. She just sat still. Damien placed his hand on her shoulder, solid as stone, but soft as it passed through her tangled hair. Justice doesn't bring instant joy, but it lets you sleep peacefully, for years to come. Before Damien and Aria had even exited the courthouse, the headlines were everywhere. Tier 1 father, 12-year-old witness, dog's death exposes extremist ring within the police department. Justice for Echo began trending on Twitter, but this time, it wasn't just a moment. It became a movement. Across major cities, peaceful protests bloomed. Nobody in the Sullivan family asked for demonstrations. But people showed up anyway, holding Echo's picture, waving signs handwritten in love and pain. If a dog's death shakes the whole country, it means he was never just a dog. Echo didn't bark, Echo protected. My service dog saved me from depression. His name was Bailey. Thank you, Echo, for fighting for the rest of them. In Southridge Springs, the air shifted within a week. 3 schools announced special units on civil rights and racial literacy. Community leaders demanded the creation of an independent oversight board for the police. The town council convened an emergency session. And in a move without precedent, the entire command board of the Southridge Springs Police Department, except Marissa Flint, was officially suspended pending an internal investigation. At the breakfast table, Jade set the newspaper down, her eyes still locked on the bold headline, "The reform that began with a dog and a 12-year-old girl." Damien poured another cup of coffee. He didn't say a word, but in his eyes something shifted. Not triumph, but transition, from anger into action, from action into change. At the Grady family's home, Mrs. Marlene hosted a quiet gathering for the families who had spoken out. No cameras, no reporters, just people who had suffered and chose not to stay silent. When Aria walked in with her father, everyone stood and clapped. No one asked them to. No script was written. But in every pair of eyes was something Damien recognized instantly, a gratitude too deep for words. Mrs. Grady hugged Aria gently, whispering, "You're the reason we didn't give up." Aria smiled. For the first time, a smile untouched by tears. A week later, at a press conference, a reporter asked, "Mr. Sullivan, can you share why you're not seeking damages for defamation?" Damien shook his head. Money doesn't change memories. I don't want compensation. I want justice for those who will come to Southridge after my daughter. Another question. So, do you believe you've won? Damien didn't answer right away. He turned and looked toward Arya playing with Nova in the waiting area. Nova gave a soft bark, then sat down as if sensing she was being watched. Damien turned back. His voice was firm, unshakable. Victory isn't in the verdict. It's the change of an entire community. If that continues, then yes, we've won. After the conference, a young PBS reporter, curly hair, bright eyes, approached Jade quietly. Her voice was soft, but her gaze was clear. We're not here for headlines. We just want one line, from the person everyone keeps talking about. But I haven't spoken yet. Jade looked toward Arya. The girl was folding a paper rocket, carefully creasing each line. She didn't pressure her. But she would ask. An hour later, in a softly lit room with no direct cameras, Arya was invited to speak. Nova wasn't with her. Damien and Jade sat silently in the back. The interviewer asked gently, Arya, if there's one thing you want the world to remember about Echo, what would it be? Arya looked into the quiet space ahead of her, then slowly turned. Her voice was soft, but it rang like an echo through stone. Echo didn't die to be silent. No one breathed, no one spoke. They didn't need to. The clip was 12 seconds long, no edits, no effects. But within 48 hours, it swept across America. The phrase became a rallying cry, painted on signs, printed on children's book covers, hung outside animal shelters and child advocacy centers. A new organization formed from a community-led initiative. Echo's Light, a non-profit offering trauma therapy to children who lost animal companions, and retraining therapy dogs for military and first responder families. That night, at the Sullivan home in Southridge, Damien and Arya sat on the couch, watching the news. The clip played again on national television. And when it reached Arya's words, Damien reached over and gently squeezed his daughter's hand. You didn't just save Echo, you know that? Arya leaned her head on his shoulder, smiling softly. I didn't save anyone, Dad. I just told the truth. Damien looked down at her. And truth is the bravest thing anyone can say. Outside on the porch, Nova gave a quiet bark. Not out of fear, but as if in response. Because after everything, the truth was still here. And this time, no one had to be silent anymore. Saturday morning. The sky was clear. The sunlight soft. No harsh winds, just enough to make the small flag outside the Animal Rescue Center sway gently, like it was breathing in sync with hearts that had only recently made it through a storm. Damien parked the car, killed the engine, but didn't step out. He turned to look at his daughter Arya, wearing a hoodie with the Orion constellation on the front, holding a thick sketchbook filled with drawings of Echo, and a few journal pages tucked in the back. On her wrist, the silver thread bracelet, a birthday gift from last year, still rested, perfectly intact, as if the things no longer present could still be carried, just to remind her that some losses never truly leave. Are you sure? Damien asked, voice as quiet as breath. Arya nodded, but didn't open the door right away. She looked through the window at the pale white door ahead, with a wooden sign above it that read, Southridge Animal Haven, where every soul finds a home. She read the line again, silently. Then opened the door. Inside, peace hung in the air like a lullaby. Tails thumping, soft licks against kennel bars, a few small barks from dogs hoping to be chosen for a morning walk. A young staffer stepped out from the back, smiling warmly. The Sullivans, right? We've been expecting you. Thank you for coming today. Arya gave a small smile, a polite nod. She didn't speak. She just held her sketchbook a little tighter. They were led to a quieter room, a cozy space with padded floors, plush toys scattered around, and a few pups tumbling over each other in play. These little ones have all been rescued within the past 3 months, the staffer explained. No history of aggression, no major health issues, all vaccinated, all cleared. Arya stepped in. She didn't rush to any of them, didn't squeal or giggle like other children might. She simply sat, cross-legged, in the middle of the room, and waited. A few puppies wandered close, sniffed her knees, then scampered away. But one, a soft, white-gray pup with folded ears and a caramel smudge on its nose, approached slowly. It paused, watched her. I took one more step, then gently rested its chin on Arya's knee. She said nothing, just opened her sketchbook and placed one page on the floor, a drawing of a dog gazing up at a sky full of stars. The little pup, still unnamed, sniffed the paper, then laid down beside it. "What's their name?" Arya asked softly. The staffer checked the clipboard. "We've been calling her Luna, just temporarily. No one's adopted her yet, so she's not officially named." Arya nodded. "I want to call her Nova." Damien leaned closer. "Because she's a new start?" Arya looked up. "Number because she'll keep shining. Where Echo once stood." Nova lowered her ears, then gave Arya's hand a slow, gentle lick. No howl, no bark, just acceptance. Quiet and complete. On the way home, Arya sat in the back seat, Nova curled up in her lap. No one spoke much. But as the car rolled past the park, the one where Echo had died, Arya turned to the window. She didn't cry. She didn't bow her head. She just whispered, "I kept my promise, Echo. We're moving forward." Nova let out a small sound, not of discomfort, not of worry, but as if he heard her too. And agreed. When they pulled into the driveway, Damien stopped the car. Arya stepped out carefully, holding Nova with both arms. The house was the same, quiet, safe, and once again echoing with the sound of soft paws on hardwood floors. Nova hesitated when she entered Arya's room, didn't jump on the bed, didn't ask for anything. She just laid down at the foot of the bed, in a corner opposite from where Echo once slept. As if she already knew this wasn't a replacement. This was a beginning. That afternoon, while Damien prepared dinner, he heard the soft scrape of pencil against paper. He peeked in. Arya was drawing. Not Echo, not Nova. This time it was a collar. Simple, with an 8-pointed star for a pendant, and beneath it, a single hand-sketched line. "For you, Echo." She didn't say a word as she slipped the drawing into the drawer, just stood up, walked into her room, and pulled out a craft kit her mom had given her years ago. And started. The collar was finished by 8 p.m. Arya slipped it gently around Nova's neck. The ribbon was soft, black silk, the pendant hand-cut from a weathered commemorative coin, and the engraving is wobbly, uneven, carved by a child's hand, but trembling with sincerity in every stroke. Nova looked up at her and let out a low, quiet whine. Arya nodded slowly. "This isn't to make you Echo's replacement," she whispered. "It's to help you become the very first Nova." She placed her hand against Nova's chest, felt the tiny heartbeat flutter beneath the fur. "But you'll carry what Echo left behind: his courage, his loyalty, and a promise I never want to forget." Nova licked her hand. A soft, warm gesture like sealing a bond between two souls. One old, one new. From the hallway, Damien stood watching. He didn't interrupt, didn't speak, just quietly slid the door latch into place. And smiled. Not the smile of victory, but of a father watching his daughter sew her own heart back together with thread made from memory and courage. Inside the room, the moon-shaped nightlight glowed softly, casting pale yellow halos on the ceiling blurry, shifting constellations that seemed to breathe. Nova curled up at the foot of the bed, her body as a quiet question mark still waiting for life's answers. Arya's breathing was steady. No tossing, no whimpering, no flinches like the nights before. Her face, though still marked by healing wounds, was peaceful. And for the first time in weeks, she slept so deeply that her lashes didn't even twitch, as if her body had finally found a safe place to surrender to dreams. Damien took one step back, then turned down the hall and made his way out to the upstairs balcony. He sat in the old wooden chair, pulled his weathered army jacket tight around him. The wind moved through the pine trees at the edge of the backyard. In the distance, the faint hum of a patrol car whispered through the quiet of the main road. But tonight, it didn't trigger the same tension it once did. Everything was in its place now. Every camera was feeding footage to the backup server. Jade was monitoring from the legal office. Marissa was updating federal investigators every hour. And his daughter, the same child who once sobbed until her chest gave out over echo. I was sleeping peacefully. He closed his eyes, not to rest, but to capture that final image before sleep, Arya placing the collar around Nova's neck, whispering, "For you, Echo. A goodbye, a new promise, a quiet sign that wounds when touched with the right hands, with true intention can heal. They don't vanish, but they stop bleeding." Damien opened his eyes and looked up at the stars. For a fleeting moment, he thought of Eleanor, the woman who left too soon, and whispered in his heart, "We made it." Downstairs, in a lavender-painted room, Nova shifted in her sleep and let out the softest sigh. Arya didn't stir, and for the first time, after a storm that had lasted far too long, morning wouldn't be the start of another battle, but simply a normal day. A day with the sound of puppy paws pattering down the hallway. A girl waking not from nightmares but from the smell of pancakes her father was flipping downstairs. No guns, no interrogations, no threats, no case numbers on a government file. Just life, just healing, just a beginning that felt finally real.